It came at 7:14 a.m. before I'd even put the kettle on. Start packing. The house has been sold. No hi, Mom. No explanation. Just a command like I was a tenant overstaying my welcome. I stared at it, blinking hard, half convinced it was meant for someone else. But my name was there at the top, Corinne Halstead. No mistake. I didn't answer. I just placed the phone face down on the counter and walked to the front door. I needed air. The morning was quiet, the kind of quiet you only notice when it's about to break. The sun was just peeking over the neighbor's fence. I stood there in my robe trying to make sense of nothing. An hour later, a white SUV pulled into the driveway. A woman in heels stepped out, smiled like she knew me, and slipped a folded brochure into the mailbox. I waited until she drove off before opening it. My house, my garden, my living room staged with throw pillows I didn't own. Charming 3BR with character ideal for renovation. So that was it. He'd listed my home, my name still on the deed, without asking. I sat at the kitchen table for a long while, the brochure open beside me, Malcolm's coffee mug still in the sink. I wasn't shaking from shock. Not really. I'd seen this coming in the tilt of Graham's voice, in how he started using the word space when he meant distance. It was after Malcolm died that everything shifted. Graham stopped dropping by, started bringing Dana instead to handle things. The way they spoke to me started sounding more like instructions than conversation. I told myself it was just grief working its way through us differently, but maybe I'd been wrong. I walked to the hall closet, reached up behind the winter coats, and pulled down a manila folder marked Plan B. Inside was everything Malcolm left that no one knew about, and a set of keys that had never hung by our door. It had been Dana's idea to meet on a Tuesday. She said the girls had soccer on Thursdays, and weekends were impossible right now. So Tuesday it was. I brought a coffee cake, the kind Graham used to like when he was 12. It sat untouched in the middle of the table. Dana pushed a folder toward me. "We've been doing some research," she said, as if we were planning a vacation. The label read, "Transition Plan," in soft blue script. I opened it, already knowing I wouldn't like what was inside. Brochures for assisted living centers. A color-coded budgeting worksheet. A downsizing checklist printed front and back. There were even mock-ups of how I could maximize my comfort in a one-bedroom apartment. Dana smiled like she'd solved something. "We just want what's best for you," she said. Graham didn't say anything. He stared at his phone, scrolling. Not once did he meet my eyes. The kitchen smelled like lemon disinfectant and new furniture like nothing lived in. I closed the folder quietly and slid it back across the table. "What do you think?" Dana asked. I folded my hands. "It's very thorough." She nodded, relieved, mistaking my calm for compliance. Graham stood up, then said he had a meeting, kissed Dana on the cheek, walked past me like I wasn't there. I sat alone for another minute, staring at the untouched coffee cake. "They'd probably like it at the office," Dana said, already lifting the tray. I smiled. Just enough to pass. Outside, I got into my car and sat with the engine off, fingers curled tightly around the steering wheel. That folder was still in my lap. By the time I pulled into my own driveway, I knew exactly what I was going to do. Because while they were planning my transition, I was already packing for something else. They didn't even use the good towels. I noticed that first. In the bathroom, someone had laid out crisp white hand cloths that had never been touched. The floral ones Malcolm and I used every day were stuffed in the linen closet. I opened the door wider, just enough to see the realtor's sign tucked behind the vacuum. They hadn't even bothered to hide it well. The photos on the living room wall had been rearranged, our wedding portrait missing, replaced by a framed print of some generic beach. One of the armchairs was gone too, the one Malcolm always sat in to read. In its place stood a delicate little end table with a ceramic vase I didn't recognize. I walked slowly, as if the house might reject me for intruding. The light felt staged. The throw blanket on the couch was folded too perfectly. My home had been turned into a showroom, and I hadn't been asked. In the kitchen, I heard Dana chatting with the girls about the new buyers. She said it like they'd already signed. I stood behind the doorway, still quiet, listening. Grandma's moving somewhere quieter. Graham told them adjusting a picture frame I'd hung crooked, on purpose to annoy Malcolm. She'll love it. It's time. I waited for one of them to ask where I was going. No one did. When they left, the girls bouncing ahead, Dana on her phone. Graham talking numbers, no one said goodbye. They didn't even glance toward the hallway where I stood like an afterthought in my own home. I didn't cry. Instead, I walked into the study, opened the bottom drawer of Malcolm's old desk, and took out the leather folio he always said not to touch. Inside was everything I needed to move forward. But what caught my breath was what lay beneath it, an envelope with a name and an address written in Malcolm's handwriting. One I hadn't seen in years. The call came just after noon. I was sitting by the window reading the envelope Malcolm had left. His handwriting was unmistakable, looped and deliberate, like he wrote slowly on purpose. But I hadn't opened it yet. I just held it, turning it over in my hands, when the phone rang. Ms. Halstead, this is Felicia from Crosswind Title Agency. Just a quick call to confirm the signature on the buyer's agreement. I hesitated. Buyer's agreement for what, the property at 743 Morton Lane, she said cheerfully. Just a routine verification. We have your signature, we just need to confirm it was signed in person. I didn't speak. Not right away. I'd like to see the document, I said. In your office. Today. An hour later, I stood in front of her desk. She smiled, slid the papers across the surface like it was nothing. Like it wasn't my name forged on the dotted line of a contract to sell the home I'd lived in for 41 years. It looked close, neat, careful, but the angle of the loop on the D in Halstead gave it away. Mine leaned left. This one didn't. Whoever had signed it had practiced. A lot. Thank you, I said, and slid the papers back toward her. My hands didn't shake. Is everything okay? She asked suddenly, unsure. I'll let you know, I said. I walked out with the copy, tucked into my folder. In the parking lot, I opened the flap again and looked at Malcolm's envelope. I still hadn't opened it. But I didn't need to, not yet. I knew what came next. Because the person who signed that contract wasn't sloppy. He wasn't careless. He was deliberate, and that told me something worse than betrayal. He didn't think I'd do anything about it, which made what I was about to do all the more satisfying. The key was cold in my palm, ridged from years without use. Malcolm had handed it to me once casually, years ago, like an afterthought. Just in case, he'd said. I never opened the box. Not out of trust, out of assumption. Some doors don't feel urgent until every other one closes. The bank basement smelled like metal and paper, quiet, in a way that made you speak softly out of respect. When the lock clicked, the sound felt final. Inside were stacks of envelopes orderly labeled in Malcolm's handwriting. Pension statements, investment transfers, an account ledger, all pristine, untouched. No shared access, no joint signatures, no Graham, no Dana, and at the very bottom, wrapped in linen like an heirloom, a deed. Not for Virginia, not for anything my son could reach or rewrite or sell. A house on the southern coast of Spain. My name on every single line, no co-owners, no contingencies, no heirs pre-assigned. Just Corinne Halstead. My throat tightened. I'd known Malcolm loved me, but this was not love in words or poetry. This was love in architecture, paperwork, and independence. He'd built a second exit long before I knew I needed one. I exhaled slowly, sitting in the quiet vault room, holding the deed like a secret he trusted me to understand one day. I wasn't angry at Graham in that moment. I was finally grateful Malcolm and I had spoken two different languages, his in plans, mine in belief, and that at least one of us had been fluent in foresight. I reached for my phone. The number was old, scribbled on a postcard tucked beneath the deed. Marisol Cadiz. When she answered, there was no hesitation in her voice, just warmth. Warmth I hadn't felt in months. "Corinne," she said, "it's time." "Yes," I didn't explain. "I didn't have to." "Yes," I whispered. "It's time." Because if I was going to leave, I wasn't walking away quietly anymore. I was walking toward something chosen, shaped, and waiting. I booked the flight for Sunday evening. A one-way ticket with no seat selection. I didn't care where they put me. Front, back aisle, window, it didn't matter. I just needed to be moving. The moving van came Saturday morning. Two men with careful hands and curious glances. They asked where to put the boxes, and I pointed to the front hallway. I'd labeled them the night before in thick black marker Graham Dana household memories. Not family, not heirlooms, just items, things. Whatever story they told now belonged to someone else. I didn't take much. A week's worth of clothes. My documents. The leather folio from Malcolm's desk. The deed. And one framed photo us in Spain 10 years ago. Malcolm had just gotten sunburned, and I was laughing at the way he kept adjusting his hat, like it would undo it. His hand was on my shoulder. We looked easy. Not happy in a posed way. Just unbothered. That was the last real vacation we ever took. By late afternoon, the house felt hollow. Not sad. Just done. I walked through it slowly, room by room, touching the door frames with the flat of my hand. I whispered goodbye to no one in particular. The dining room still had the faint scent of cinnamon. The hallway closet, that stubborn squeak. Every inch of this house had Malcolm's thumbprint somewhere. And mine too, but none of Graham's. That part had always been missing, and I had just refused to see it. Before locking the door, I slid the house keys into an envelope and set it on the counter. I didn't write a note. I didn't need to. As I stepped outside, I didn't look back. My suitcase rolled quietly behind me down the walkway, the wheels soft on the stone. The driver was waiting at the curb engine, humming. He didn't ask where I was going, and I didn't tell him. Because finally, after everything, I was heading toward a place that no one had chosen for me. By the time Graham stepped through the front door, I was already across the Atlantic. He stood in the foyer of the house he thought was his to sell, staring at the spot where the envelope with the keys used to sit. The boxes were still there. Graham Dana household memories neatly stacked like parting words he didn't know how to read. The realtor had called him that morning. Her voice clipped. "The buyers backed out," she said. "There's an issue with the signature on the closing paperwork." The notary flagged it. It didn't pass verification. She didn't say the word forgery, but she didn't have to. Then came the second call, this time from a local investigator. "We'd like to speak with you about a complaint related to property fraud," he said. "Would you be available this week?" Graham had never been good at hiding nerves. I knew that about him. He clenched his jaw when cornered, rubbed the bridge of his nose like he could press the guilt back into his skull. Dana wasn't quiet about her reaction. Neighbors heard her shouting through the walls that evening. Something about his arrogance, his shortcuts. How she told him this wasn't the way to handle it. Their daughters asked why Grandma's number didn't work anymore, why her photos were gone, why the house felt different. He didn't have an answer. Because what he'd tried to do wasn't just underhanded, it was illegal. And the worst part for him wasn't that I'd left. It was that I'd left without fanfare. No confrontation, no permission sought. No explanation offered. Just silence and a trail of consequences he couldn't outrun. The home he tried to sell now sat empty. Not his. Not mine. Just a structure echoing with the sound of what it used to mean. And while he stood in the quiet replaying whatever version of events made him feel less cornered, I was unlocking a different front door thousands of miles away with the same name on the deed. The air in Spain met me before anything else did, warm without rushing, carrying a quiet that didn't feel empty. It felt expectant. Salt-heavy, sun-soaked, embroidered with the faint metallic hum of the ocean. My lungs remembered how to expand. The villa was exactly as Malcolm described years ago, when we were still making plans instead of postponing them. Whitewashed walls, trailing vines, shutters, painted the shade of deep coastal twilight. The address hadn't changed. And neither had the name on the bills. Corinne Halstead. Electricity, water insurance active. Uninterrupted. As if the house expected me to show up eventually. Marisol was waiting by the gate, grayer than I remembered, softer too. She didn't ask why I came alone. She simply opened her arms. Bienvenida a casa, she said. Welcome home. I didn't cry. I inhaled. The difference felt important. Inside every room was a familiar blank canvas. Tile floors cool under my shoes, open windows moving the curtains like slow breathing. I climbed the staircase without strain, ran my palm across the carved wooden banister. Solid, patient, unbothered by time. Unpacking wasn't urgent here. There were no deadlines, no estimations, no opinions to work around. I placed my suitcase on the spare bed, opened it, and took out the framed photograph first. Malcolm and me sunburned and laughing at ourselves. I set it on the bedside table where the light would reach it every morning. Later I found a single wine glass in the kitchen cabinet and poured without measuring. On the terrace, the sea shimmered like a promise rather than a reminder. The horizon didn't demand anything of me. It just held still, steady, unjudging. I turned my phone off, not in anger, but in completion. Silence, I realized, wasn't absence anymore. It was jurisdiction. I finally decided where the noise was allowed to reach me. Somewhere below the cliffs, waves collapsed and rebuilt themselves in gentle repetition. A rhythm without narrative. No blame, no pleading, just continuity. And for the first time in years, I felt my life begin where someone else's expectations ended. The letter arrived folded in imperfect thirds, the edges softened from travel. No printed label, no tidy fonts, just handwriting, earnest and a little unsure. Elise's handwriting. I recognized the loops in her Y's, the way she dotted her I's like tiny stars. She used to decorate school notes that way when she was younger. I unfolded the page slowly, as if rushing might bruise the words. Grandma, I know what they did. I'm so sorry. I miss you. I found the boxes. I found the real story beneath them too. I don't care about the house or the arguments. I care about you. Can I come see you even for a little while? No rehearsed explanations. No borrowed phrasing from her parents. Just a question. Vulnerable and unarmored. For a long time, I held the letter without moving. The sea hummed beyond the terrace patient. I thought of the boxes labeled in black marker, stacked like reluctant witnesses. I wondered what truths she had pieced together with her own young hands. I hadn't intended to answer right away. I told myself the silence was caution, but honesty felt simpler. The silence was fear, not of Elise, but of hoping again. Still, I cleared a corner of the kitchen table, found a pen that wrote smoothly, and allowed myself one draft. No speeches, no verdicts, no collateral pain passed down. Elise, I would like that. If you come because you want to, not because it feels like rescue. There is room here, and good air, and no score being kept. I signed my name fully, no abbreviations, no shrinking. I posted it from a tiny post office near the market where the clerk sold stamps beside jars of honey. Nothing about the moment was dramatic, yet everything about it felt consequential, because forgiveness wasn't what I was extending. Not yet. What I offered first was possibility. And possibility, once opened, tends to widen all the rooms that follow. Elise arrived just after noon, her feet unsure on the gravel path, her suitcase small enough to suggest she hadn't planned to stay long, but hopeful enough to suggest she might. She didn't knock. I had left the gate unlatched. When I opened the door, we didn't speak right away. She simply looked at me, eyes soft but searching, as if to make sure I was still real and still hers in some way. I stepped aside, and she entered the villa like it was something fragile. We sat in the kitchen where the light pooled gently on the tile floor. I made tea the way Marisol taught me, with leaves instead of bags and a hint of lemon peel. Elise watched my hands, quiet but not guarded. We didn't talk about the house, or the signatures, or her parents. We talked about how she liked her new literature teacher, how she'd started keeping a journal, how she found my old scarf in one of the boxes and wore it on the bus, even though it still smelled faintly of cinnamon and dust. We talked about choices and what it meant to live with them, not under them. She asked me if I had ever been scared to leave something behind, not because it hurt, but because it was familiar. I told her yes. Every chapter of my life had arrived with shaking hands. That evening, we walked down to the beach. The sky was smeared with low pink clouds, and the tide curled in slow breaths against the shore. Elise took off her sandals. I followed. The sand was cool beneath our feet, not cold. The kind of cool that makes you notice your skin and thank it for still feeling. We didn't hold hands, but we didn't walk far apart either. At one point, she paused and turned to face the sea. "I don't know what comes next," she said. Neither did I. And for the first time in years, I didn't need to.